statement or a question or something.
I'm Jay Cowan from Ottawa County. Again, first I'd like to state that I'm old enough that I was educated without the Federal Department of Education. And I had teachers that inspired me, and I had teachers that taught me. I didn't have teachers that were in a box and had to do scores and had to do testing and had to do all this. They educated. And I think that's why our schools and that's why our students are losing, is because they're not being educated. The teachers are not allowed to educate anymore. I'd also like to say that I listened to you talk about poverty. You almost sound like a social liberal to me. My father was probably the most poverty-stricken person I've ever known. He had nothing. Okay? And the man went to a little schoolhouse where the teachers taught him, and he learned mathematics to where he was a genius almost in mathematics. He ended up going into the military, and when he got out of the military, he finished his high school education and went on to engineering. And he always told me that was because there was teachers that inspired him to make him learn. It's not by some government telling him what needs to be done or how to be done. So I guess one of my questions I have, and I can't keep going on here, so I'm going to ask, if you have state and local control, if it is controlled by the federal government and the standards of Common Core, I'd like to know, in both of your opinions, how this possibly could give local control from state and city, county, to our school districts if it is controlled by the federal government. Thank you.
Let me tell you some of the ways the federal government has their hand in it, but that isn't my only concern. My other concern is the bipartisan agreement, Democrats and Republicans working with corporations on the policy level. Not that corporations can't give money to a school to help a school. We've had that for quite a while. That's a good thing. We like for people to make money and give money. I was at the Hall of Fame dinner last Friday night. A friend of mine's uncle was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I was honored to get to go. At the end of the presentation, Governor Fallon spoke, and it was a wonderful speech, and she talked about the uniqueness and the individuality, the creativity of people educated in small rural schools from the Panhandle to southeastern Oklahoma corner. And these are men, a couple of women, one woman at least, I remember, but they were people who grew up in Oklahoma in these hard times through the Depression, some of them, and were educated with solid academics. And our Governor Fallon said very well, you know, they're individuals, they're creative, they're unique, and they're prosperous, and they give back to the state and to the communities. They give money to schools, to different projects around our state. That's a good thing. But as I said and listened to my friend Mary Fallon, I thought, Mary, they're not coming through your human capital pipeline. That's what the brochure says describing America Works, which she held up at the press conference at the NGA meeting. Now, she may not think that means anything, but words mean something. And I know what those words mean because it is school to work, as Janet confirmed. It's school to work. It's controlling and matching workforce data through the state longitudinal data system and the individual student files to track students P20 from preschool to not age 20, but 20, which is grade 12 plus 8 more years. Now, this is a great idea to people who have social engineering ideas. It's a great plan. Now, Janet said many things I agree with today. Let me make that clear, many things that I agree with. But I'm focusing in on where I disagree, because I could stand here and agree with a lot of things too. But the point is, what you're asking and what you're saying, top-down control is Common Core. The Federal Department of Ed said in Education Week, it's reported in April, they will review and revise the testing elements. They will make the final determination of the testing. Now, if people believe the federal government isn't going to do that because we just say, even though we sign up for all these deals, That's wrong. They will do it if we don't get out of them. We must get out of the Common Core, English language, arts, and math. And if you don't think teachers are being told how to change their curriculum, how to change their methods, start talking to the teachers in your schools. Ask them. They will tell you they are not getting to teach like they taught before effectively. I've had people call me crying and saying, I've been Teacher of the Year in my school, and I'm told now I'm an ineffective teacher if I don't change my methods to these new ways. Do you want to say something there? I'm sorry, Mike.
I didn't mean for the really but I'd like it to be a little bit shorter.
Okay. It's hard to...
So let me also confirm that I was educated without a U.S. Department of Education, and I did just fine. And I look forward to the days when Oklahoma children will not have a U.S. Department of Education that will have to do that. I look forward to that day, and I support that, and I still stand on that. Right now I have to deal with reality, and there is a U.S. Department of Education. But one thing I've really learned since I've been in office, they're actually more scared of us than we are of them. You can push back, and they bend. I picked fights already with them, and I've won. I picked a fight on the way we report our graduation numbers, because they wanted us to be in line with all the other states. And I said, it's not going to work for Oklahoma, we're not going to do it. And they said, what do you mean you're not going to do it? And I said, well, we're just not going to do it. It doesn't work for Oklahoma, it doesn't work with our legislation, it doesn't work with the way that we run our state law on achieving classroom excellence. And I said, so what's, oh, I said, it's okay. I said, no, now tell me what's going to happen. He said, well, you'll have a finding on your audit. I said, okay. What then? They couldn't answer me. They had no idea. I'm picking another fight with them now. It's on mathematics. Our kids should be able to take algebra in the 7th or 8th grade if they have the skill to do that. Right? Your district generally lets them do that, but they penalize them. And it's because of federal law. They make them also take a test for 8th grade math. That's just dumb. And I've told them that twice, and they've said no. So this time, we're asking again for a third time. All right, I said, third time's the charm. We're going to ask them one more time. And I said, if they say no, then we're going to take this thing to the height, because it's this state's right to determine what tests our kids take and when they take it. Now, I understand, very, very quick, I understand your concerns about assessment. But let's take an analogy to that. From the day our kids graduate from high school, they're going to be accountable for things, and they're going to be tested. Just recently, a year ago, I went to the doctor for my yearly checkup. I was feeling great. Didn't have a problem in the world. As a matter of fact, my whole life I've been fighting low blood pressure. Walked into the doctor's office, my blood pressure was through the sky. We checked it 3 times through the sky. Put me on blood pressure medications, fighting unions, what it did. Anyway, they put me on blood pressure medication, and it didn't bring it down. Put me on a second one, then she looked at me and she says, you've got to go on a diet and exercise plan. Put me through a bunch of cardiac tests, all of that. I went through it, lost 46 pounds so far. I no longer take blood pressure medication. I didn't know, I didn't know I was even sick. You check your speedometer when you drive, that's a test. Every day we're tested. Sir, I respectfully disagree. If you don't measure, you don't care. We have to know how our kids are doing. And the assessments the teachers give, they're learning to take the data from those assessments and adjust their instruction to meet the individual needs of children, because children learn differently. And that's what those assessments reveal to them, is how those children learn. This is education moving along to be able to meet the needs of kids in the different ways they learn. And so it is actually an educational tool for the teachers. Now,
yeah, I think a question. My children go to Christian school. My husband and I, make that sacrifice because we want to have the ability to choose for our children what they're exposed to. The Christian School Consortium, they're going along with the English and the math at this point. And they said, that they need to, because of the assessments and also the ACT and SAT. David Coleman is now redesigning the SAT to be in compliance with Common Core. So if the children don't learn that in schools, then they can't go on to college, they won't score as well. So my question is, and then also, so I went to the Homeschool Legal Defense Association because they, are pretty active, and they have a section of their website now with concerns about Common Core. So, but my question is, okay, so we're talking about what we're going to opt into and opt out of, but I'm seeing the homeschool parents showing textbooks now with their Saxon math is already Common Core compliant. My Christian school, the kids' math has a Common Core compliance stamp on it. You said that you're redesigning the curriculum for science. Who is the textbook company that's willing to make the 50 different textbooks? Because all the textbook companies I've seen are all going to Common Core compliance. So how do we protect our kids in Oklahoma and not take in this science and history and social justice and all the other stuff and protect our kids when there's only a couple of percent or something because all the textbooks in the world for pretty much every state. Who is our textbook that will make, our company that will make that to protect our kids?
There's a textbook committee, and I tried to come in and make half of it into parents and community people, and I was told I couldn't do it because it's actually laid out in the Constitution. It has to mostly be by teachers, and you can only have one private citizen. So we're not going to go in and try to change the state constitution to do that. But after the standards are set, then the textbook committee comes in. They must select textbooks based on the standards. And so if a company cannot demonstrate that they are completely aligned with the standards, they can't be considered. Does that help answer your question? So they have to change for us. But I also know that teachers tell me that more and more that they are using other methods to get information. Teachers are telling me they think textbooks are kind of inadequate. They disagree with some of the textbooks, so they'll use a textbook for part of it, but then they go to other types of resources. Almost all of them are free. And so it's a combination of things. You're going to be seeing things coming in, particularly as we get deeper into digital learning and taking a look at what individual kids need. But we may not select a textbook unless it's aligned, with the standards. And the company has to accommodate us. But I agree with you. I'm frustrated because just a couple of companies are really putting out all of the textbooks.
My hope is that we reject Common Core in the state of Oklahoma, as a number of other states are also in the process of rejecting Common Core. There are good things that teachers who have experience and success in the classroom have proven to be good in the ELA, English Language Arts, and math that we now have. We can keep those parts, but we do not need to be hooked to an assessment that aligns with standards produced by the same people of the same mindset that produce the science and social studies you projected. Because there are things in ELA and math that are also a problem. David Coleman, who was on the panel writing the standards, said that there are 5 shifts in ELA. It's not the methods teachers have used. Did you have a question earlier?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm a former 3rd grade teacher. Yes, I'm responsible for that 30 some odd that didn't reach satisfactory, who obviously should not have gone to 4th grade. My concern is with the new testing that the 3rd graders are going to be taking with our new state law that we have in place. Any student who does not score limited knowledge or above, it is limited knowledge. They can go on if they score limited knowledge, which you said earlier.
2 grade levels behind.
Is 2 grade levels behind, exactly. These children who are going to be required to reach limited knowledge are now our special ed students. They will not be receiving the same type of modified assessment they've been given before, but yet are still going to be held to the same accountability standard. And I left 3rd grade. I was, not to pat myself on the back, I was a pretty good 3rd grade teacher. The blood pressure thing you were talking about, the health things you were talking about, that was affecting me because of the stress I had on myself to make those kids perform, because it mattered. I left and went to 1st grade, and now I'm teaching Common Core to these 1st graders. and they are doing things that my third graders had to do. And I'm not completely against that. But what I'd like to know is, you said those kids are really not, they're 2 grade levels behind. They're going to be retained up to 2 times. Can you both share with me your feelings about how that will affect them in the future? Because if they're retained in 3rd grade, well, before 3rd grade, I understand it can be a 1st grade retention counts as one of those, a 2nd grade retention counts as one of those. But let's say they weren't retained until they hit 3rd grade. And a teacher makes an inadequate portfolio to show those kids should be able to move on. Let's say the teacher fails in there.
It's getting around 12 o'clock.
There's a lot to it.
Late, but I'm
Right.
trying to get out
How's it
done.
going to affect those kids that are retained 2 years and graduate when they're 20, if they're able to graduate?
So there are 6 exceptions to the law. One of them is special education, and if a child is retained once on an IEP, they're go ahead and are advanced. The assessments, the evaluation of these kids begins in kindergarten, and it's supposed to be a K through 3 process where the parents are informed, vertical alignment, helping those kids. But I get teachers all over the state coming to me and saying the new techniques you all are teaching are actually revolutionizing my classroom. Because most teachers were taught on literacy first. Except I'm now finding now, University of Oklahoma believes in whole language, and they're teaching whole language. So we're having to go back with high school teachers and teach them phonics-based instruction. Don't get started on that one. So the problem is, and you're saying, so there's 6 exceptions. And if a child is retained twice, it doesn't mean they're just put into 3rd grade and they have to just kind of struggle along. Because now you understand response to intervention. That means if a kid is struggling, they have to be 90 minutes involved in reading activity. And then if they continue to show that they're still struggling by a benchmark assessment, you have 30 minutes on. So it's concentrated time. In terms of that, there's specific strategies that are used to assist that child. We just don't throw them to the wolves and tell them to try to get along by yourself. Very specific strategies, intensive work. This district can use their money for summer academies if they want for those kids, increased amount of time on task to get them there. I can show you study after study after study that in states that have had this retention law, that reading scores have gone up dramatically, and students have moved off of IEPs and are in the regular classroom now.
I taught special education. I'm a certified special education teacher, learning disabled, mentally handicapped. I think you did speech, right? And I worked with children who had all ranges of learning difficulties. I then worked in a private clinical setting with motor development skills of the visual system. So I know that there are children who will do the very best they can every day, and they may have the highest IQ in the class, but they're not developmentally ready to accomplish some of the tasks being forced because teachers are being told they can do it if you make them. We haven't been astringent enough. Now, I know your intention, I believe. I'm not questioning your intention, but I'm talking about the reality of what's happening in the classroom. I may or may not run for this office in April when it finally comes. I may or may not. There is a lot of confusion across the state of Oklahoma about what's going on in education. The A through F issue on the front page of the Daily Oklahoman, the testing that crashed and crashed and crashed last year, the technology needs. Are we going to pay more, hundreds of millions of dollars statewide for the technology to do this type of testing that's going to be longer, more stringent, like the work in the classroom? There are many issues involved. I'm not going to try to answer all of them, but I agree with the concerns of the teacher. I'm hearing that from teachers all over the state, and if there are some accommodations, teachers don't know about that, and they need to be trained in these accommodations because they're being told they can't accommodate.
There are accommodations.
4 more questions, and I've got one right there. He's been jumping up.
Just real quick. First of all, most everyone in this
Ask the
room
question, yeah.
understand. I've been critical of a lot of Superintendent Barresi's policies. It's not because I don't like you. You have wonderful children, and that says more about you than anything, by the way. So, but I'm very, very confused because on one hand, just a few questions ago, you said you understand that children develop and learn at different rates, yet we've mandated in the law this 3rd grade reading policy. I'm also very, very confused that this isn't a top-down approach. yet we have no choice in textbooks. I'm very confused that we have no idea how much this is going to cost. The State Department of Education has come up with no figure on how much the implementation of Common Core is going to cost. And just a whole list of things that I can go through here. After reform, after reform, after reform, and you said for 10 years we've been at the bottom. Well, guess what? 10 years ago, No Child Left Behind was in here. Is there any quantifiable research, data, and results that tells us that Common Core is going to do any better than No Child Left Behind, or RAT? I call it RAT, Race to the Top. Is there anything that tells us that this is actually going to work? Are we off on another goose chase? You didn't answer Jay's question. The fact is, who is going to be accountable? The teachers. All this data and this top-down approach is not functional. That's not Oklahoma. How do you reconcile these facts with your actions?
Okay.
This is a state that has local control of schools. So the local school board decides which of the textbooks on the list that they're going to adopt. They decide on the policies. They decide on the policies, on the type of curriculum their teachers are going to teach. Folks, there were liberal teachers before the Common Core. And there will still be liberal teachers after the Common Core unless a local school board acts. I mean, that's just the fact. This is a situation to where we either decide for the next 2 years will determine the next 2 decades in this state. And we are not just preparing kids in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th grade to go on to the next grade. We're preparing them to be productive citizens and to be great contributors to their communities. We either do this heavy lift or not. And the reason I'm doing this is because I know every time Oklahomans are faced with a challenge, roll up their sleeves and they get the job done. And it's going on in the state. I get teachers all the time telling me that they like this type of teaching. They're embracing it. They said, finally, I've got the time to make sure my kids understand the information. I like developing these cognitive skills. And teachers are telling me they were not taught how to teach reading and how to teach mathematics in their colleges. And that's, I mean, I talked with the deans of OU and OSU, and they said, well, we're helping teachers to be lifelong learners. And I said, can you just teach them how to teach reading and how to teach mathematics?
I need to respond, and then we'll take a couple more questions, right? Okay, I just want to say, let's don't throw out all of the good teachers across the state of Oklahoma that do know and have proven methods and materials in their classroom now. To be told that they're ineffective is nothing but demoralizing, and there's no proof of it. We have no proof that the Common Core state standards, which we have adopted, ELA and math, will improve education. Dr. Sandra Stotsky was on the national panel writing them, approving them. At the end of the process, she said, no, these are not good. They are not better than where I've already worked with people producing them in other states. Massachusetts, for example, where they were first on the National Assessment of Education Progress in the nation. People in Massachusetts are up in arms. Pioneer Institute is there. Read what they have to say about this. I'm in agreement with Heritage Foundation, Pioneer Institute, Dr. Sandra Stotsky that I just mentioned. She was the only educator on that panel with ELA, which we've now adopted. She would not sign it. She rejected them. She's speaking all over the country. Dr. Milgram has done the same thing with math on the math panel. He is a professor out of Stanford, and so I'm not giving you my opinion only. My opinion is in alignment with scholars, educators, and conservative think tanks, as well as liberals, and even teachers' unions are absolutely people who fought me. The leadership of the unions fought me. Although, when I had Linda LePack was there, she knows how boiling over that state capitol room was on a hard day to get there. The unions were lined up to make sure I was not confirmed. So we have some of the same opponents because we're Republicans, right? We're not going to do the Democrat agenda. And we do have a Republican signed up to run against Janet, who is backed by Democrats and the Chamber of Commerce. And she even openly said at an administrators meeting that George Kaiser is funding her. One of her big donors. She bragged about it.
Let's go to another question, John.
that. And I think parents do have the right to know how their local school is performing. While we may not agree 100% with how that grade is achieved or determined. And I don't believe there's anyone in this room that would not be for abolishing the Federal Department of Education. So my question is, on the A for F grade card, did that make us eligible for federal dollars? And if it did we accept the federal dollars or did we decline the federal dollars?
No, and as a matter of fact, I agree with Senator Coburn and Senator Inhofe in the letter that they wrote, that federal funding should not be connected to the adoption of any set of standards, of any curriculum or anything like that. I completely agree with that. Checked with Governor Fallon. She completely agrees too. And as a matter of fact, she has directed me to not do that. No, it had nothing to do with that. These are just reform packages that in other states that they have been put into place have experienced exponential growth. Washington, D.C. used to be the worst of the worst on the NAEP. They just jumped 22 points in achievement. Indiana just jumped 14 points in achievement. Florida just jumped 11 points in achievement. When you have accountability, when you have transparency, when you have rigor, it works. And folks, we can either take what we're doing and have a remediation rate in our colleges of 43%, which is what it is this year. That means your tax dollars goes to teach kids in college again what they should have learned in high school. We can either do that or we can prepare them along the way. The choice is ours. If the legislature decides that this is not for Oklahoma, then I will follow that. I'll salute and move forward. But I can tell you, I have serious concerns about the future of this state. We must institute rigor. We've got to continue to move forward.
Okay, let me answer, please. Okay, I need to say a little bit. That's fine. I know it's it's confusing. Now, let me just say that.
No rush. This is what we're here.
Okay.
This is what we're here for, sir.
Okay.
This is what we're here for.
Let me
So if you
speak.
sit down, let him speak short answers so we can get more
Okay.
questions, we can get more done.
You're taking
Because I
time
can't
up,
give the
buddy.
answer if we've accepted the GOP.
Okay.
How much money have we accepted from the federal government?
We've got to do the protocol. I know it's hard, but we need to follow the protocol, okay?
Twice she's been answered. You haven't got the answer.
Better.
Ask it. We haven't got the answer yet.
Okay. Okay, let me answer, if I can remember where I was on this, and I think we need to let those gentlemen speak. Not a question. Okay. Back to where we were. You said several things there that are wiped out of my mind. I'll try to answer that later. Go ahead.
I have a doctorate degree. My name's Greg Keeper, and I'm from Ottawa County. I have an 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old daughter. This lady right here is telling the truth. This lady right here is who I'm here for. You cannot make that lady, excuse me, what's your name? The Mrs. I'm pointing, I do it, okay? You can't make her teach kids. If the kids don't want to learn, they're not going to do it. If the parents aren't going to make them do it, she can't do it. She can't get the job done. I've been to the University of Oklahoma. I went to the University of Alabama. I was on a full academic athletic ride. I will make it a question. Talk long, I will talk long. That's what we're here for. I earned it. I was taught by parents. You're saying you're talking out of both sides around the reason why the children are successful. Because the parents teach them to be successful. The teachers recognize who those parents are. I believe in every child having the opportunity for an education, but it is a privilege, not a mandate, not by the federal government, not by the state government. It is not my responsibility, nor is it hers. My child excels. She does more homework now when you're smart than when you do when you're not smart. How I learned in school is the smart kids had time to get their work done in school, and when they went home at 3 o'clock, they had chores and they were taught work ethic to go with that education. My child doesn't have time to unload the dishwasher, do the laundry, feed the dog, or work on the land because she has homework 4 hours an evening at 11 years old. It's simply not the case what you're speaking of. You've avoided the question 2 or 3 times. How much money have we received in this state from the Department of Education?
Okay, there's a question.
There it is. Please, it's a number. How much money?
Every year.
No. How much money? Every year, nothing. I want to know how much money this year we accepted.
Can I answer your
It's,
question?
yes, the dollar amount, very simple.
Every single year, the federal funding for schools comes down. Before I was in office, and now that I'm office, come through a series of titles. And so it's Title I, Title II. So it's aid to children in poverty. It is money for the training of teachers. It's money for training for kids. English is a second language, and on and on. Special education is the biggest chunk of it. The biggest chunk of it. And then the Department of Agriculture sends money for child nutrition for kids that can't afford it. It's approximately $615 million a year.
It's not our responsibility in the school systems for those individuals. I am sorry.
I want the Department of Ed to go away and that money to come back to Oklahoma for us to decide. But that's not the reality I work with. None of it is tied with anything else. It is not tied to that. As a matter of fact, I just got through saying, I'm pushing back on some of their requirements. And they don't quite know what to do with this. And other states are starting to do that as well. They're pushing back. And they're saying, we're not going to put up with it.
Okay, let's push all the way back and get rid of Common Core, which came to us with a trick for money. It was about money, yes. But I agree with you, and that's what I was going to say a while ago. It came back to me. I appreciate your stress and tension as a parent dealing with this daily in your home. Teachers and parents across the state are dealing with it. There are over 900 people signed up in Owasso opposing Common Core, fighting it because of these issues. The reality on the ground in real life, as you say, in real life, in classrooms, in homes, is not what you think you are creating with Common Core. The results are very, very different. It is a narrow curriculum, very demanding, developmentally inappropriate. A number of child psychologists across the United States are saying that. Dr. Koshnick, I believe is one name, if I'm pronouncing hers correctly. Very good presentation. You can find it on YouTube just a moment. And Dr. Thompson in Utah, another one, his child. In Utah, they pushed this much further. In Colorado, they pushed it much further. When we get all of these components in with more testing, which Janet has said is going to be more demanding in the testing in the future with your interview with Choice Media that I heard the other day. I believe you were in Boston with Jeb Bush at the conference there. And again, people whose ideas I adamantly disagree with are involved in writing and developing this.
Okay, 2 more questions and only questions, and these ladies will probably stay after.
Sure.
Ask a few questions for a little bit.
I am going to have to leave
Okay, well, I'm not
a little bit because I've got to be in Norman for another event.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Don, let's go ahead and make a question.
The amount was $5 million. It was last year. It's called longitudinal data systems. They can explain it to you what it is.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's go.
State privacy law.
Make it fast, please.
Sir, please, don't be disrespectful. Ladies, thank you both so much for coming to hear us. I'm here for my children and for the teachers. You talk about special education. My daughter goes to the only A+ school in high school. She is tested above her grade, above her school, every year she's been in school. And she went to a Christian school, she went to health schools. This year has been the hardest year. Every night, we have a box of Kleenexes on the table. I've watched my daughter lose her faith in herself because she is so worried about getting the right test score.
Correct.
She chews her nails. She double second-guesses herself all through class during the day.
Thank you.
And if it wasn't for having such great teachers, I apologize for saying.
Do we understand
I'm
how you feel?
so
There's a question.
please. If it wasn't for the teachers, and with any program, there's always ways to tweak it. There's always ways to step back and say, we should have done this better, we should have done this, let's implement this. I worry about my daughter falling through the cracks when she gets to a teacher that's so wore out and so broken that she just doesn't even want to mess with it.
We're already there.
She, in the last 2 weeks, got
had her TI. So, thank God, I'm so thankful that there's that program there to where it catches them before, they see they're struggling. We have read, we are big readers. We have read while she was in our room. She's always loved to read. She has hated to read now because she doesn't believe in herself. Every night, it's a 3-hour progress of homework and reading. And if it wasn't for the teachers, there's a group of teachers that are taking their own special time to help these kids and to encourage them more. So my question is, how do you plan on dealing with the mental pressure you're putting on these kids when their brains aren't developed yet to do some of the tasks that are thrown on them to prepare them for, to earn success down the road? How do you prepare? I mean, do you not foresee the problems with that? How do you plan on dealing with it?
It's hard for me to answer you that. What grade? Do you mind telling me what grade your daughter's in?
I have a 4th grader and I have a sophomore.
You have a sophomore and a 4th grader.
Yes, ma'am.
When the Reading Sufficiency Act was passed, our educators ignored it. Superintendents didn't move forward. And this is the year that it comes into effect, so they're dumping everything on the teachers this year. From the day I got in office, we started working on trying to train teachers because we knew teachers were struggling to teach reading and were struggling to teach these standards. The standards were passed back in 2010 and virtually nothing happened. There's a few districts that did their work, but they're dumping them on teachers this year. The teachers are feeling it, and that's why I'm asking people to pray for the teachers. And the teachers are ones that are putting this off on the kids. The kids see it. Any kids are, they see tension, and they take it upon themselves. If your daughter's a good reader and has good comprehension, I'm struggling to understand how she's struggling. So maybe you and I can have a conversation later on, and I can help you with that. Your sophomore understands.
Let me interrupt, I'm sorry.
Sure.
The part where the comprehension, on some of the testing and the paperwork, it's cut out to them to where it could be 2 different answers. It's kind of a trick thing. And I spoke with the teachers and stuff, and even the teachers sometimes they get it wrong because it could be 1 of 2 different things, and they'll have to check their book. That's where, it's just causing.
Yeah.
It's not just my daughter losing confidence.
Well, I'd be really happy to visit with you individually so we can kind of get deeper into it and I can get a better idea. But a lot of those decisions they have to make go to critical thinking skills. This isn't stuff that's made up. This is stuff that we know that kids need to be able to do to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are coming to this state by the time they leave. And so your daughter that's a sophomore is now facing the end of instruction assessments. And in Oklahoma, the type of assessments that we've had all these years are some of the simplest in the country because they're the kind of lowest depth of knowledge. It's just recognition of an answer, and that's how we got into the drilling, all the drilling, just to recognize something that you're going to forget. One of the things that's good about the new college and career ready standards is it's all about applying your knowledge. When you apply your knowledge, you remember. And it becomes real to you, and it becomes relevant. So you have to give them the foundational skills, and then you focus on applying the knowledge and building these skills. So,
when you require a child to think cognitively, abstractly, on a level that they are not developmentally at, there is pressure, there is stress. They can be the best student in the classroom and melt because of the pressure. I have dealt with this in a clinical setting. I know how it works. I've seen it with my own children for a period of time. But now we have a locked-in testing at the end of it all along the way, and the teachers. Their evaluations are based on student performance, their jobs, their grade, their rating. We haven't locked all of that in yet, but it is already written, documented, and I'm not just talking about Oklahoma. All 45 states that are signed up for Common Core are going through this. We have only implemented a little in Oklahoma. That's why we're not seeing a huge outcry yet. And some people go, well, it's not that bad. We can tweak it, we can fix it. No, we can't fix it. because the standards themselves, English, language arts, and math, include these types of methods and materials to be used. It's new. It's different.
Real quick, my nephew is the principal in this district, high school principal. And this past school year, he funded money to get laptops for some of the students. They took them home, they opened them up, and some of their 7- and 8-year-old siblings started looking at pornographic sites on those laptops. Okay, he is living, he thought that when he got the laptops, they would have that programs deleted. He calls your office, talks to a gentleman, and he tells them what site it was, his Playboy. And they saw very inappropriate things these kids did. And so he wanted to know how to turn that site off. Your friend or your subordinate told him, you don't want to turn that site off. And he said, you can turn the picture off, but the reading is very helpful and insightful for them to learn.
Can you give me the name of that employee? Because I will be texting that employee on the way back to Oklahoma City. The decision about access to any site is determined by the IT director at the district under the direction of the local school board. And if they have, it's called a one-to-one initiative that the principal was able to get for those kids. That is all supposed to be predetermined before it's handed out to the kids by the IT director. And it is also an issue where those kids are supposed to go through extensive instruction on responsibility in using those laptops. It is not productive just to hand it to it and say, go home. In districts that have a one-to-one initiative, go through extensive instruction with the kids on what it means to have the personal responsibility of having a computer and what it means to have personal responsibility about using it. But then also, when they're there in the district under the district's Wi-Fi and their internet, there's blocking on that, and they're directed. There are sites that they can't get on. But please, I mean, I'm dead serious. Give me the guy's name. I want to know who that is. Okay.
And he was supposed to call back the next Friday, and my nephew was going to take it.
Thank you.
Call him back.
Okay.
Well, let me know. We'll take care of it.
I don't know who this person is, and I'm not accusing the person I'm going to name, but in the IT area at the State Department of Ed, we have a man named John Craman who came directly from a chief, which wrote the Common Core state standards. He is the head of student information at the State Department of Ed, and his job is specifically to make sure that we get everything aligned according to the achieve requirements. He works for the State Department, I realize that, but I know how he has spent the last 10 years. And we've got people in place. Mr. Summers, who's coming in as the Secretary of Education, is also a technology person. He was appointed over the Department of Vocational Technical Education, and I'm sure he's a fine man. But he will also be, as Secretary of Ed, now appointed by Governor Fallon, the head of the Office of Education, Accountability, and Quality. The state longitudinal data will go to him regarding education. He is a technology guy. Of course, we know this is a lot about technology. He was, and may be still, the CEO of Park Diem Online Charter Schools when he was appointed Secretary of Ed. He was already the head of our VOTEC system. We've got a lot of people that Janet may or may not know or be familiar with their background, but these pieces are there, and we need to look at the big picture because it isn't a pretty picture. We need local.
I'm not going to let that go. I'm not going to let that go. So let's talk facts. Let's talk facts. John Craman is in charge of the student information system. John Craman works for me and for the State Board of Education and for you. John Craman came in and said, what's my job? And I said, your job is to get tools in the hands of teachers' hands. Your job is to get relevant information in the hands of teachers. That's your first and foremost job. I said, after that, you're to help us get information on how to drive policy at the department. His job is not to work for a chief. He works for you. He works for the state. He works for the taxpayers. So I'm not going to let that one go. Bob Summers is no longer associated with Carpe Diem, okay? Bob Summers is an incredibly capable man that is taking a fantastic vocational technical system and is going to absolutely make it even better, providing better opportunities for Oklahoma kids. Folks, there's no conspiracy here. These are good, responsible individuals that are working.
One last question. I think a lot of this comes from this issue of federal money. Coming down, federal money coming down, schools accepting that, the state accepting that. As far as the A2F grading scale, your people came into my office and we talked about that because you sent a 93 as an A instead of a 90. Typically, parents would expect a 90 to 100 to be an A. Your folks told me in my office at the state capitol, they set a 93 because they would get an exemption for No Child Left Behind for Oklahoma. That seems to me that is a compromise on the state side so we can get something from the federal side. How are we going to expect to do it?
Representative Todd, the legislation was changed this last year, and now it's on a 10-point grading scale. So 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, and that was part of the change in the formula, and we didn't get a peep from anybody. It's another thing, I don't doubt, sir, I don't doubt that they said that to you, but we've changed it back. We haven't heard Pete, but if we had, I would have told them too bad, that's state law.
But let me answer, but back to the point that the federal money drives this. Yes, it does. Someone said that earlier. I forgot my other issues, but that was one of them. We were able to waiver the No Child Left Behind because we adopted that style of A through F, or that we adopted A through F. All of this is driven by the incentives of money. Even the end result, we've got to get to the future for all those jobs that we bring in two men from out of state because we don't have an IT person in Oklahoma that can do that instead of someone from Washington who came directly from a chief. We don't have someone who can be director of VOTEC of all the superintendents of VOTEC in the state of Oklahoma, and we bring someone from another state who is and was when he was appointed, maybe not today, but when he was appointed VOTEC, and he held that place as head of a charter system which will profit. It's for profit. There's a whole lot of corporate money everywhere that it shouldn't be. Some places it needs to be.
Okay, the last question is right there, that gentleman right there. Make your question.
I won't let this continue. There is no connection of federal dollars with any of the reforms. I won't let that line of argument go forward. The state is still getting the same amount of federal dollars based on its need in the state. There is nothing connected to any of the reforms that pays out federal dollars. Thank you.
But it was set up to not be called a liar. It was set up with money. We did not get the money for Race to the Top. We got the stick and no carrot.
I want to speak on, I want to ask a question on what you're talking about with, just like the math problems and then explaining why the answer logic that they use to come up with the answer. Whenever I was a freshman in high school, I struggled with algebra. And whenever I get to the real complex equations, I didn't know how to come up with the answer. And so my stepmother was helping me with it. And she finally said, in my frustration, she finally said, then you don't have to understand it, just do it. And that fixed everything. And so I didn't have to understand the problem. I just started doing it. And I made the honor roll in all my classes. And by just learning the process, I then started to understand. And sir, please. And so then whenever I got to college, I had a 3.75 grade point average. Now, if those standards would have been placed under I was a freshman in high school, I might not have the same story because I was how can you justify that?
It's because you learn differently than other kids, and that's what we're trying to honor. Teachers are learning to teach reading and math in different ways to meet the different learning styles of young people. You learned one way. When I learned mathematics and advanced mathematics, I had to go back and understand the why of why I was using a formula And I'm really glad for you, you didn't, because you and I learn differently. What we're trying to do, and I got through it through my long slog, and you got through it through your long slog. Teachers are learning how to meet a child's different learning styles and to adjust instruction to that child's different learning style.
I'm a special ed teacher. I spoke and taught teachers at OEA conventions back in the 80s, workshops on how to work with children with visually related learning problems. There are things about thinking that develop. There are abstract skills, abstract thinking skills, cognitive skills that aren't there sometimes even when you're 15, but they're there when you're 18. Just like 2 + 2 is 4. Learn the foundational operation answers quickly before they're required to sit there and fill out a page full of information about the process. The process is even being graded in these advanced tests that everyone is going to have line up with this. So, Ben, I would never label you as a person who learns differently. I have no battery of testing. You do not label without a battery of tests to determine if someone is a unique style learner. I would say that many students in high school do not understand algebra while they're learning the process, how to actually work. Computational skills, let me say it that way. They compute it before they really understand it. So that's the way it works. But, oh, that's traditional education, so we can't do that, because what we're really going after at the end of this 12th grade of high school is equal outcomes instead of equal opportunity to learn with individual differences. That's what OBE did. That's what Common Core does. It flips the philosophy opposite to what it is now. And if you listen to David Coleman and some of these other people that were on the Common Core State Standards panel, they tell you this. They're trying to close the achievement gap with their ideas, theories, philosophies that don't work, are not proven at all, and get rid of what we know that is proven, even with research. That doesn't matter anymore, because they've got it all figured out differently.
Okay.
I have a question.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
They will know, I'm sorry, this is the second district meeting. Sit down, please. We'll talk about it later.
Sure.
Okay, that's fine. I don't mean to be until the hun here, but we've got to have some before. I think it's 1 o'clock, I'm pretty sure it's 1 o'clock.
I have to apologize. I have to get Janet to another event in Portland, so I have 20 minutes.
We'll be here for the next 6 months, and whoever gets to be the nominee will be here for a year. So we will have our problem. Okay,
Can I just make one quick comment?
well,
It's a quick comment. I'm just saying, email Janet Barresi.
Yes, right.
She will get back with you, even if she doesn't.
And Linda will too.
So I'm just saying, if you don't get to talk to her today, email her, she will get back with you. Now, you didn't do it to me.
Right. Okay, folks, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I knew it would be a little bit going, and I appreciate you're all doing a service. You're a service. Thank you. Great.